Now we're recording. Um, so yeah, again, just want to thank you for doing this. I know it's part of the workday for some of you, but really for us, it's really to get a reset to the year as we think about fundraising for 2020. I think we had a great year in 2020, and we will be able to give you kind of an updated numbers very soon once we are able to crunch those and close out the December books, and for the year to really give you kind of the full picture of what our success was in 2020. But with that, wanted to, similar to kind of the conversations around diversity and belonging, with fundraising, we also want to be on the same page. And as you saw in the agenda, we're focusing on what's your why as part of our framing. So our goal is hopefully that Allison and I, in the event we need to tap on anyone on the board and with a last minute request to join us for a meeting with a potential funder or re-engage and a prior donor, all of you will have your kind of, essential, like an elevator pitch ready, your why, to join in with us to kind of be able to have both staff and board talk about the fun and hopefully loop that person into our fold. So with that, I want to share my why. So my why is the fun is right up my alley because of its focus. So social, racial, economic justice for me is literally my life. So many people shared with me that, oh, this was a perfect marriage when when it was announced that I was joining the fund, because that's really who I've been and what I've been about, especially in my adulthood. But really, it goes back to my childhood. So, as most of you know, I grew up in South Carolina, in the Sea Islands, so the Charleston area, or what's called the Low Country. So it's really been a lifelong commitment to social justice as a young kid, as a teenager, and then much more hardcore as an adult. Locally, I'm very much kind of based in Roxbury and has been embedded in a lot of the community organizing efforts here. And a lot of that work connects to so many of the organizations that the fund supports currently and historically. So, you may have heard me said, yeah, I know that person because I've been involved with that organization, and many of them are organizations that we fund or connected to it. So for me, I'm a part of an ecosystem that I already was a part of from many different angles and perspectives. So that's my why. The fun and its focus is at the heart of what I've been about as an adult. So it really is a direct connection to my passion, and I've made my vacation my vocation. So that's my why, and that's just one small example. And you'll have the opportunity to share your why. And what I wanted to do now is turn it over to Allison and Ellie. And many of you do know Ellie. I don't think any of you don't know Ellie, but again, thank you, Ellie, our former board member, longtime board member, and former vice chair, who is our development, also a development expert as well. Oh, you're on mute. Even in 2021.
Yeah, I have to do that at least once a day. Sorry, it was with you guys, but I do it once every day. I almost know everybody, but not really. Right. So, I know we're going to go around and everyone will say who they are and what their why is. I don't want to go out of order, but I don't know Dominique. I don't know someone else, Lauren. So, I mean, do we want to go out of order and just say who we are, or should we stick with the plan of saying who you are at your whys? Sorry, we didn't rehearse this. And there's a little peanut on Dina's laugh that just, I mean, what you all don't know is that I knew Dina when she looked exactly like that, even before that.
She's very excited to join the meeting.
So, well, I'm thrilled to have you all. So, Eric, I'm going to go to you. Do you want me to give everyone
Yeah,
a chance to introduce.
that's
I don't
fine.
know if they all know each other. That's the other thing.
Yeah, and maybe as a part of when we jump into the what's your why, people can introduce themselves more
Okay.
fully.
All right, I'm just going to jump in then. And for those of you I don't know, I hopefully you'll want to get to know me when I'm done, or you can just hit that mute button. We're off. So I have been involved with the Lenny Zakem Fund since Lenny started it 25 plus years ago. Joyce and I were in a mom and, well, I knew Lenny professionally, and Joyce and I were in a mom and baby exercise class when Josh was, I think, about 3 weeks old, and Becky, my daughter, was about 6 weeks old. So we definitely go back, did some great partying with Lenny, and did a ton of learning from Lenny. And throughout his journey in life, his journey through his illness, and certainly the journey through building LZF, I've been on the sidelines or in the sometimes the front row. So I'm a long time connected, but I will say that like you, Eric, the motivation and the connection to what Lenny started and what the Lenny Zakem Fund is today, you know, goes back as far as I could remember, since I was almost the size of the peanut that just left us. You know, having grown up in a Jewish household, we called it Tikkun Olam. We were very much a social justice, our obligation to repair the world and participate in whatever way we could was something that was very deep in me throughout, from grade school on, really. So even though I think in some ways it was a following of Lenny's dream and passion, the mission itself was always part of what drove me to wake up every day. And it became my vocation as well. Eric, you and I are more alike than you might have thought. Not growing a beard anytime soon, at least not intentionally these days. So, you know, I took my passion for social justice and making the world a better place and improving the brokenness, eventually to become a professional fundraiser. Started in the volunteer world and then became a professional fundraiser. And after 25 plus years at Brandeis, Dana-Farber, Perkins School for the Blind, Harvard School of Public Health, Museum of Science, I said, I want to have a deeper, broader impact in my community. I have a greater sense of urgency. I'll be able to do this better as a consultant helping multiple organizations versus just wearing one uniform and being in one space. So I launched Stars Align right smack in the middle of COVID, because who wouldn't want to run their own business with no backing in the middle of a global pandemic? I thought it was kind of perfect timing. And I've been off to the races, and thankfully I'm very busy and enjoying working with lots of unbelievable nonprofits. So this is both a labor of love and how I pay my bills. The Lenny Zakem Fund is always been my kind of passion play. I've been a volunteer for the Lenny Zakem Fund since it started, and as Eric said, the roles I've played on the board. I think my most proud contributions are Susie Cates and Tim James, because I think as responsible board members, building out the board and bringing new people in, and especially if you're able to bring in people that really pick up the mantle, run, and take anything you might have done and just grow it exponentially. So Tim and Susie are obviously extraordinary examples of doing that. So I'm proud of that. I've also managed to solicit some money for the fund and give as much as I can. It's always annually my biggest gift of the year. So having said all of that for background, I thought what I would do is kind of take the veil off a little bit about fundraising in general and demystify it if anyone is still mystified by it. I'm often asked, oh my gosh, how could you be a professional fundraiser? I can't think of anything I'd rather do less. How do you ask people for money? All of that. I usually, explain in the days when you had cocktail parties, if you announced that you were a fundraiser, it was a good way to get people to scatter. But the fact of the matter is, I never think of myself as asking anyone for money. I'm inviting people I think are like-minded. I'm inviting them to participate and invest in an organization that is going to make really important, good things happen in our community. So I couldn't ask anyone here for $5 for myself. I really couldn't. But I have no problem asking anyone for lots of money. If it's appropriate, the number, et cetera, you do your homework. But, to invest in the Lenny Zakem Fund, for example, and usually the most important piece of this is being able to say, we care about some of the same things. Let me tell you the pieces of the Lenny Zakem Fund that I think you might care about, but are certainly the things that matter most to me. Just social justice, way before it was on the tip of everyone's tongue in the last year or couple, social justice is what it was founded on. The little guy, the sense of helping those who aren't necessarily, they have the will, they have the passion, they don't have the means. I mean, we've all heard that. But, enabling, cannot believe I just blanked on the name of the guy in East Boston who is Dominic. Anybody know who Dominic is? Rob, you do.
Dominic Avellini.
Yes, thank you. Being able to give people new to this community the tools to learn the language and, become part of the community. All of those things were so important then and now. And so for me, I look at some of the organizations that the Lenny Zakem Fund has started. UTEC, was way before UTEC was what it is now. They were a Lenny Zakem Fund grantee. And if anyone on this call doesn't know UTEC, it's an emergency. Go find out who they are. Even a small organization like Ballet Rocks was one that I fell in love with the first time I saw the kids do a dance recital, and that it's the one place where these kids have to go and grow and be mentored into their lifestyle, their adult lives. So I think that for me, the Lenny Zakem Fund enables communities and individuals to become their best selves. And I see it on a systemic way in a variety of ways. It's what made me fall in love with Lenny and then the fund and stay in love all these many years. So I hope I've demystified a little bit some of the fundraising stuff. I'm happy at any point if we go through this exercise to answer lingering questions. And I thought it would be fun for Allison and I to kind of demo a little bit of what Eric started out with, which is he wants to be able to call on any member of the board and or Susie. Allison, Susie, and Eric are driving a lot of this. Tim is vice chair and development committee, be able to call on any of you or us to partner in a donor conversation, a prospect conversation. So Allison and I will just kick it off with an unrehearsed, totally unrehearsed, so apologies in advance. I'll try and keep it clean, don't worry.
Great. Okay. So in this role play, I'm going to be playing myself, the director of development, and reaching out to Ellie as somebody who has been actively involved and supportive of LZF for a number of years. But now that she's no longer on the board, not as really up on the day-to-day of the organization. And being new to the organization, I have yet to meet Ellie. So that's sort of the setting the framework for today's role play. So, hi Ellie, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Allison?
I'm great, thank you. And I just want to first of all just take a moment to thank you for giving up a few minutes of your time. I know that we're all dealing with a lot personally and professionally in these circumstances. And so I really appreciate you just taking the time to for us to have a conversation and get to know each other a little bit better.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to do it. I think it's hard to find time some of these Zoom-filled days, but I'm really happy to do it. I care a lot about the fund, and I'm out of touch a little bit.
So I understand that you were with LZF really from the beginning, and so you have both a personal connection to the organization in terms of Lenny and his family, but also as a longtime board member until very recently. Is that true?
It is true. Well, you know, since 2020 was about 5 years long. I don't know exactly. I think I'm 3 years off the board. But yeah, so, and I really haven't been that engaged, you know, even before 2020.
Well, let me just take a few minutes just to kind of update you on what has gone on, particularly last year. It was a particularly momentous year for the organization in many respects. As you know, we celebrated our 25th anniversary, and I want to thank you for your sponsorship and for being on the host committee, and as well participating in our virtual event. Would love to hear your feedback on what you thought about the event and how it resonated with you as somebody who's been really, while close to the organization, hasn't been really actively involved the last couple of years.
Right. Well, yeah, I thought it was great. I'm happy I was able to be a sponsor. I wasn't working most of the year, so I wasn't able to sponsor at the level I was accustomed to. But, you know, it's funny when you celebrate an anniversary of an organization you've been involved with for so long, you know, there's pieces of it that are really tug at the history of it. And what resonates with me is that, you know, I can't ever divorce the Lenny Zakem Fund from Lenny Zakem, the man. But the reason I continue to give is really about what the organization continues to do and how over the last few years it's grown into itself in a new and different way. And the development, and I am curious to hear like some of the changes and how you talk about your values and your mission. You know, I was at the very beginning of that work, but you know, Jude was the development person. It was a different organization. I'm excited that we have people of color leading this organization. I'm excited that there are so many people on the board that actually didn't even know Lenny, but might as well have, because they want to carry that torch. So I'd love to know in the last couple years how the values and vision and kind of mechanics of how the fund works has changed recently.
Okay. Well, those are excellent questions, and I will try to tackle them all in the order that you pose them. And if I forget something, please please remind me. But what I would say is to start by talking about, as you probably saw in the virtual event, the breadth and depth of the different organizations that we're supporting. And we have, over the last 25 years, supported well over 400 organizations. And those are organizations, some of whom have really grown and expanded both geographically, but also in terms of the number of people they've served and in the ways that they've served their constituents. And others have really just shorn up and solidified their foundation as a grassroots organization and being really effective in their work. And over the course of the 25 years, those 400 organizations roughly account for about $10,000 in grant funding. And so we have found ourselves.
I'm not understanding. 400 organizations count for $10,000.
10 million. Did they misspoke?
Okay.
Million.
That sounds way better.
$10 million in grant.
Good.
Oftentimes we are supporting these organizations through multi-year grants. In some of those grants, we are offering to them in the form of challenge grants. So we're allowing them to be able to leverage their support, our support of them with additional support from others. Sorry, I'm blanking on.
That's okay. I know we don't have a lot of time. So if you could just answer the question for me, is there one thing that you know over the last couple of years that the fund has done differently that I might not know about that would be of interest to me, either in direction or funding or practice?
Sure. So earlier last year, as the pandemic was really revealing itself to all of us in the significant seriousness of its impact on all of our lives, our executive director and board made the decision to establish an emergency grant fund. And we decided to make that funding available to both current and former grantees. And over the course of a handful of months, we were able to successfully raise well over $400,000, and then quickly disperse that money to close to 50 grantees in a series of 3 different rounds of applications. And so that really was allowed us to touch base not only with our past grantees and help them in continuing to do the important work that we supported them in doing, whether it be 3 years ago, 5 or 15 years ago, but also really continuing to support the work that we've been doing with our current cohort of grantees. And that's something that we are, as we look as we're now in 2021, knowing the uncertainty of the pandemic going forward, we recognize that we might need to be prepared to be responsive to some ongoing emergency needs of our grantees. So that is one example of something I think you I hope is a long time supporter, but also a board member should be really proud of as the Lenny Zakem Fund has been able to really be a real ally to our grassroots organizations at such a critical time.
That's fantastic. I'm so happy to hear it. There's history even in that. I feel like the fund was always instrumental when community needs arose, like with immigrants for a while. There was an emergency effort around getting immigrants access to legal work, or what you know what I'm talking about. I don't need to tell you. And also a lot of summer grants were the kind of thing where just like it's kind of urgent. we need to do this for the summer for kids in our community, et cetera. So as I listen to you, I am re-enthused. And if there's some way that you might think about in the next few days, you could shoot me an email about ways in which I may get involved. And really, I'd like to make a small gift in honor of you and Eric to just say my own personal welcome and thank you for your first year of getting this organization through the toughest year any of us have lived through. So I will be making a small gift in your honor and in Eric's honor. And I'm just going to say a big hearty thank you for keeping this fund going and growing and glowing.
Thank you so much, Ellie. I really appreciate it. And I will be happy to send you a quick email kind of with some bullet point ideas. And again, recognize that we're all, each of us are living through this and pandemic, and want to certainly be respectful of your time and what you're able to contribute in terms of your support of LZF. And so we can certainly have a follow-up conversation, or even shoot me an email if there's something that you want to learn more about. And I'll just want to pause by thanking you once again for just being such an incredible ambassador for the organization, and just for your generosity, and just know that every gift that you have given, no matter the amount, is greatly, greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure and privilege. And the only thing I'd love to do is hear from your board now, and I'm going to zip it. I would love to just hear from everybody. If we could go around the Zoom room, introducing and kind of how you would help talk about the fund in a way that you think draws people in and gets them excited. And we went a little too long. That's mostly my fault. So feel free. And if you want to just help at any point, or, we're all friends, and this goes nowhere other than the recording that's on that will not be shared widely. It's internal. So please let me answer any questions, but mostly I'd love to hear from each of you. And Allison or Eric, I'll let you drive.
I'll just want to jump in quickly and say, normally in preparation for any conversation I have with a donor, I'm sitting down thinking about what their giving history has been, what their relationship has been, and coming up with a kind of a game plan. So, and taking into consider not only their the individual's capacity and inclination to give, but also their affinity with the organization. And so, and in terms of working with any board members, inviting any board members or Eric to be a part of that conversation, really sitting down and outlining what our goals are, and how we each want to, the roles that each of us plays.
So I guess I should just make one clarifying point, is that I was kind of opening the floor for more general conversations that were not specific to an ask. If there's ever an ask being made, you better know what you're asking for and why, and be able to talk about the specific need. I also forgot to mention that, and I think that these were distributed, everybody should also always have those facts that Allison had, that it's 25 years old, that you've given away $10 million, that you've, supported 400 organizations, I think. Mm-hmm. So you should just, and 3 to 5 facts is all you need to sound like you know what you're talking about. And I think that is always part of the conversation as well.
Ellie, that's a good point, because I was actually going to inquire about that, just your view on what you think is the right amount of facts to have on deck. So I think that what you said was very helpful. I think that what I would say to the rest of the board members on the call is that to the extent that you don't have, some of those facts readily available, I think that, our, from a development standpoint, we'll have some of that information for you. So you can always feel comfortable reaching out to Allison if you just want to have some background info so that you can, go in well-informed in these kinds of conversations. One quick question I would have for either Allison or Ellie is there, in your experience, how do you best gauge when's the right time to just have a more general conversation about LZF versus when's the right time to make the ask, if you will?
Want me to grab that one, Allison, or do you want to?
I would say in my experience, what I tend to do is take a look at a donor. If they have been a donor to the organization, take a look at when they typically give. Always when reaching out, be really transparent about the reason why I want to meet with them or speak with them. And so certainly there's always an aspect of an update. But if I do want to talk to them about a gift, I will be very clear about that, so they can come having given some thought to the conversation, to their own giving. And in the conversation, just remind them what the purpose of the conversation is about. But typically lay the groundwork or provide some facts to then be able to support an ask.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I always think the rule of three, like people can remember three things, you can absorb three things. So, and I think it's really different if you're having a conversation with somebody that's new and you just want to get them excited and engaged. Of course, you're going to mention that you want support at some point, but that's not what the conversation is about right now. Right now, I really just would love you to come to this event or do a site visit with me or whatever that is. And you can, maybe at a later point, I could do a whole, kind of rundown on how to make an ask and soliciting. And, I'd be happy to do that. I'm also happy for anyone to shoot me an email and ask questions if they have anytime.
All right.
So is the premise of today's session for people who feel uncomfortable or maybe unrehearsed about, how to talk about the Lenny Zachem Fund, and less about how you would make an ask and how you would coordinate with development? Because I think with the example that was provided, it was more of an update repeat donor, which kind of is a different context than the first time you talk to someone. And I find that in general, for me, I really need to know my open and my close. And I think your open and your close is very different for a new person or repeat donor.
Do you want to do one of those with me?
Sure.
Do you want to be the new donor? Or do you want to be the asker?
We can do a new donor since you just did a repeat.
I mean, is this useful? Is this what you were wanting?
Well, I was just checking because I think the question that Tim had was more about how do you do the ask and when to ask, then how do you talk about Lenny Zachem Fund? And so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page as to what this session is about.
Yeah, we actually, Eric and Allison and I went back and forth because we know that there's some people that are not comfortable like being pulled into just any kind of conversation with, a new donor or a new prospect. Some are looking for an ask. So I'm totally off script here. Eric, I need a thumbs up from you if you're good for me.
Yeah, I'm fine.
To play this out.
I thought you were asking Yasmin which role does she want to play with you?
I did. She answered. She wants
Okay.
to be the donor. I'm going to be the fundraiser. Cool. I'm going to wear my Allison hat and we're going to dive in. Okay.
Okay.
Yasmin, thanks so much for agreeing to spend a few minutes with me. I know you've been to a couple events, so I have a sense that you know a little bit about the Lenny Zakem Fund. Is there any particular aspect to the fund and the work that really grabs you, and or do you have any specific questions?
Yeah, so my philanthropic, I would say, focus has been around grassroots organizations, and I see that you are a consistent player in this space. How do you serve grassroots nonprofits, and what's your edge? Why are you distinct from the other players?
Thank you so much for asking. That's such a great question, and I think the Lenny Zakem Fund does really stand head and shoulders above many other grassroots funded organizations in that we're really good about giving grants that can make a difference in a small organization, but we couple all of those grants with very important support such as pro bono legal help and accounting help, fundraising help. We create a network for all of these kind of like-sized organizations to be able to work with each other. And so being brought into the Lenny Zakem Fund family as a grantee, you are given access to a suite of tools as well as the gift. So I think we've proven over 25 years, we know how to grant grassroots organizations well. And I would say the real value add is that beyond those funds, we give them community, we give them tools, we give them resources, they get invited to institutes. And so especially as they're getting off the ground and growing, they're able to learn from other professionals in their field and get some of the hard professional tools they need, such as legal advice, et cetera. We're very grateful to
DLA Piper.
blanked on Rob, your firm's name.
DLA Piper.
DLA Piper, oh my God. DLA Piper for always, and McGladry for, giving these kinds of resources.
So you help grassroots nonprofits get access to more than funding, technical resources, and other experts and advisors so that they can flourish and grow. Is that correct?
It is correct. Maybe you should have my job. You said that so well.
Okay. All right. And so can you provide me with follow-up materials that kind of give more context and maybe your kind of your buckets for your focus area for the organizations you fund? And then I'd love to get a sense of, what your funders look like. And my range is sub $5,000 as a first gift. So I just want to be upfront about how I like to get to know organizations.
That's terrific. I'm glad you've put that out there, and thank you for sharing. Transparency is important. I certainly wouldn't want to ask you for a gift right at this moment, but I would invite you to think about, maybe in the next time we meet over the next bunch of weeks, you'd consider a gift of up to $5,000, whether it's $2,500, $4,000, $5,000, where you're comfortable, and we could kind of hone that down depending on how you want to have your impact. And I could put together something that kind of outlines what that kind of a gift could do for the organization and how it would be used. And then you'll also have a list of all the organizations that are funded over time. But a gift is as large as $5,000 is a grant to one organization and has a huge impact. So I thank you in advance for your willingness to consider a gift of that size and scope. And we can talk about it the next time we meet.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think kind of contextualizing what certain levels do always helps someone make it feel more real and more impactful. So I loved how you kind of set a milestone around giving levels. And I also thought that easing the pressure and providing a way to engage also draws people in, because people get asked for money all day long. But when I think donors are given a way to interact, if that's an opportunity for the organization, then that's also helpful. So you had a few veteran plays in there, Ellie.
Thanks. You made it easy. But I do think it is important, and thank you for pointing it out, Yasmin, that you are able to say, here are the ways in which writing a check really matters, like, and be able to talk about that a little bit. Here are the things that you might want to do. Maybe the first step isn't going to be write a check. Maybe you want to come to an institute or come to a site visit and really see the fund in action. There, or an event or whatever it is. So I think, it's like there's only a handful of things you have to know, and there's kind of a heart full of things you have to feel and be able to share. So that's I think all you have to do. So I'd love it if other folks would either ask questions or test out their pitch or whatever they want to do.
So this is Rob. I actually have a question. And it's about one of the, at one point, Yasmin said, well, I'd like, could you send me some follow-up materials? And I think that developing those and having them be powerful materials feels to me like a really important thing. So right now, for example, I'm about to make a request to my financial advisor to support the fund because, I think it's a good thing for them to do. And they now have, because of me, they have 2 or 3 clients who they do work for who give to the fund. So, it's just not just me. And so they don't know anything about the fund except for things that, I've told them a bit by bit. But having materials that they could go through and look at, and then we could discuss, I think would be really helpful. And I think, in the past, what we've done is we've kind of sent a letter and then we sent them one of the annual award banquet thing. And I just think it's daunting. It's hard to, it's hard to read. It's not hard to read, but I mean, you don't really get the impact of what we do by just reading the little blurbs about the grantees that we give to. So something that's more creative, shorter, more creative. So for example, the fact that we raised money for an emergency fund and gave $300,000 out to emergency grantees, 50 organizations over the course of the summer, we're able to pivot and do that and get support from our donors to do that. That is, I think, a very meaningful thing to say, and that's a recent thing to say. But there are things which happen all the time. One of our grantee organizations is recognized, or there's a host of various examples, and I think we need to continually be updating and generating, kind of information that somebody can read 2 or 3 pages and really feel like they've got some insight into why it is that this organization is different than the thousands of organizations that send them requests, even if those requests are sort of solicited by somebody who they know. So anyway, that was kind of my thinking. And Allison, I was actually going to call you and say, geez, can you send me some materials that we could send to them? But I think the current materials that we have, I don't know whether they've been updated, but I think they need some polishing up.
So you do have a great one pager that I asked for, so that exists already. That I think is probably 90% of what you're looking for.
Oh, okay.
85. But I think it helps to do that. And I think, you know, one of the things that's great, Rob, is if Allison gives you the kind of set of materials that are appropriate, they're what you want, it looks good, it's in the right package form, etc. But then it's also, how do you communicate
Sure.
with them? So you're writing the kind of cover letter that's going to go with these materials.
Sure.
And you're such a perfect person to say, you know, literally from day one. And you've seen the arc, and you've seen the way your firm has supported the fund. You know, all of those things are quite motivating. So I think that's part of what Allison and Eric wanted to make sure people were able to do, is not only have the tools, the thing to send that has the good, juicy, motivating, you know, values, etc., but also for each person to dig into the thing that they say with that. And
Sure.
you're just such a natural to do that.
Sure.
You know, I wanted to add something to that, Rob, sometimes I actually even use you as an example when I'm talking about the fund and some of the changes that have occurred, that you've been involved, that we have a board member who was one of the founders, along with Lenny. It's been on our board for 25 years, and it's been so exciting to see him. These are words I've shared with others, to see him so engaged all these years later with this fund, because it keeps growing and changing and responding to what's happening at the moment. So I actually use you as an example sometimes when I'm talking about the fund, because
I've been used
it talks about its lifespan and its growth and generative spirit.
Well, that's
it's something that I like seeing.
well, that's the best use of me as an example.
One thing that I might add is that, and Rob, sometimes, so sorry, I don't mean to dominate, but like I've been in market fundraising for my fund. So I'm sending a lot of follow-up meeting emails. And what I find is that I have a standard set of bullet points that are like the updates, so they can see that that my fund is evolving. It's like, you know, in the past year for you, Rob, it would be, we deployed 300, or we've raised 300,000 in rapid response dollars. We have a new executive director that's hit the ground running, and maybe one other and another, so that your cover letter isn't just, no offense, but fundraising, but a lot of flowery language about like how you feel. That's all important, but I especially like if it's a transactional person like this in investments, it's helpful for them to see kind of like bulleted out, like why it's important to give now, and it's not buried in a long flowing email. So that's, and I just copy and paste those bullets with who we are, and then a nice warm close that's heartfelt. And that's,
I'm with you. Amen.
That's.
And do you do that by email, or do you do it by,
Everything's a PDF now, but you have to gauge how formal the email should be, or if they actually receive their mail. The other thing in COVID is that people aren't on site. And so sending things through mail, they may be at their Florida house. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep. Okay.
One of the things I found interesting in this conversation so far is that we haven't talked about the actual folks that we impact and the communities that we impact, which to me is the big why. You know, it's the immigrants who might be deported, or the young person in foster care, or a senior who's facing food insecurity. You know, I don't know. For me, it's the personal, it's the individual that is that attracts me to, that makes me care.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think I pulled Dominic out of my head because he just was a good example. But I agree. If you have one story of one person that you can give that example that demonstrates, I think that's always super powerful, rather than a whole community and how you helped. I think, you know, I met this kid when he was 7, and I just went back and he's now 10, and he's, you know, doing X, Y, and Z. I mean, if you have those kind of real person stories that you can share, I think that's incredibly powerful. And it's not that any of these are either or, it's they're all both ands, because it depends on the context, the person, you know, whether you're writing, whether you're speaking. So I'm just trying to kind of paint some general concepts. But I agree with you 100%.
One of the things that I was struck with as I became involved with the organization is, and I guess went to the first awards program, was being amazed at how many organizations are out there doing incredible work that I had no idea about. And I think one of the pitches that we can make is that the Lenny Zakin Fund is in the community, even more so now with Eric and Allison and Dominique, has access, has awareness of these different organizations, and effectively serves as a good housekeeping seal of approval. There are a lot of people who really would like to help, but have no idea how to reach these people. So it's this organization that does all the hard work of finding out who these people are, screening them, says, is this a legitimate group? Are they having an impact? Will they have an impact? And then also provides them the support, which you're right, I think is a fundamental difference from simply a granting organization that sends money and doesn't follow up. So I think that, you know, because there are so many people now who recognize the need, who have become professionally successful, and no longer, and I say this from my own experience, you know, as the professional success grew, the distance from the roots and the distance from prior work in communities got greater and greater, and you sort of lost touch. And the Lenny Zakin Fund is the vehicle for reestablishing and providing a method for getting the support to these various groups.
Amen. And I think, you know, Black Lives Matter was like hit people, some people, as a little bit of a surprise. Just saying, a lot of people weren't aware of the impact on communities of color. And, you know, if you all of a sudden wanted to give, you didn't know where to go. A fund like the Lenny Zakin Fund is, you know, they know. They can tell you right away, we're doing this. Support us, we're support this cause. So I agree, it is a good housekeeping seal not to use it.
So I think I wanted to respond a little bit, Mark, to something you just said, because it resonates with me as well. And as I thought about today and what I would say to people, I focused initially on, you know, I got involved with the fund because Lenny asked me to, and you didn't say no to Lenny when he asked you to get involved. But I've stayed involved because of the work that the fund has done over the course of the years, and, you know, supporting the real change makers in grassroots communities, and predominantly communities of color, over the course of the last number of years. And I was going to stop at that because I was following directions. I was only supposed to go do 2 sentences, and then I listened actually to Eric today, and then I thought about changing things a little bit. And then Mark, I was listening to you, and one of the things that I come away with is saying, you know, over the course of a 40-year legal career, I've done a lot of work on pro bono cases and represented many individuals in really significant cases involving discrimination, housing discrimination, and employment discrimination and immigration issues. But there has always been a bit of a distance between that work and people in the communities, as communities. And the Delaney Zachem Fund fills that hole in sort of what I'm doing and what I have done, because we are closer to, and we do have a broader impact on the real grassroots people in the communities who are actually doing the hard work. And we support them in the ways that we can. And that means financially and all the other ways that Ellie talked about. So I think it really, what you said, Mark, speaks to me as well. And for some potential donors like us, that I think is a pitch, which is how do you help them get closer to feeling like they're making a difference with their dollars.
Agreed.
So to clarify, is it that you feel we can and should be making the case around our impact on grassroots organizations, or can we also confidently take it one step further to articulate specific examples of the grassroots impacts on the members of the community? Because I feel like that has been a struggle. And I also felt that when I worked for the Social Innovation Forum, is like we were unable to offer specific data around the end user and how our support ends up helping those individuals in the community.
So Allison, I'm not sure, and maybe someone else can answer, but I don't know, do we have that kind of impact data? And I'm not sure if it's, in the end, I'm not sure if it's relevant, but maybe it is. It depends on who you're speaking to. Like for me, when I talk about the Lenny Zachem Fund, I use the phrase grassroots social change, right? And this is an organization in which we are funding organizations for whom we are frequently the first grant they ever receive. And we are making the difference between, you know, moving forward or not moving forward for some of them. But I talk about, I think I got this from Jude, it's boots on the ground. So we're working with these small organizations that have boots on the ground in their communities, know what the need is, and we help them to, you know, provide the grants and the technical support and everything else that lets those visions come forth to make real meaningful change. So that's like, I don't know, that's part of my why of what I think is really different about the Zachem Fund. So, and I think, and then it follows to what Susie says as well. We're working with organizations on, you know, restorative justice and youth and education and immigrant rights. And there's so many different things, and so many food insecurity. There's so many different things that we deal with, and organizations across a breadth of, you know, issues that are local in our communities. You know, again, and I say that we're primarily in Eastern Massachusetts, so that we have the ability to really establish those relationships in the non-COVID world, to be able to see these organizations, be with them, be present. So, but I don't know about the actual impact data. That'd be harder to get at.
Well, I noticed Lauren wrote in chat. Lauren, you, and I think it's important what you were saying about the stories.
Yeah, I mean, as a fundraiser in my career, I think stories really do resonate. If you can tell a succinct, short story with people about how a grant from the Lenny Zakem Fund has impacted that organization. You know, everything that we've talked about, I think having that on hand, maybe written up to share with board members who may be meeting with prospects could be helpful.
Yeah, to the impact data, I think that's something that we're working on in CIC, and Dominique and Eric and Mickey and I can speak to that. But at the moment, I think like if you have a few like stories that illustrate Lenny Zakem Fund, like who we work with and why it matters, I think that can be as equally powerful if we don't have kind of the aggregate stories. But I wonder, Allison, all the materials that you've created and saw created with the SIF consultants, that's like who our mission, vision, values, whatever our theory of change sentence is, plus the 400 organizations, plus the $10 million is enough. I don't think, you know, it's not like an institutional funder is the recipient and they want to understand like how it's additive to their portfolio. I think for the very sophisticated donors at the, you know, 50K and above, it's going to take cultivation to convert them to that level. So it's a different set of material. So I think it's very much the one pager plus, if people feel like they use stories, is probably all we need here. And the impact stuff is not far from our mind, but not where we are today.
And just to briefly comment, yeah, Dominique and I did some number crunching. So the risk is that, you know, given our relatively small number, so when people in their applications report the number of people served, we did crunch those numbers for the most recent applicants, but it's not something that, you know, the organization had been kind of sharing previously because the likelihood of those numbers swaying from year to year. So, but just to put it out there, so that is something that we collect and we ask organizations, because some have just kind of one number, some have multiple programs, and they also calculate who they're serving in different ways and interpret it differently. So there's, you know, because of the nature of our portfolio, it's not kind of a uniform system to collect that, so that it's really comparing apples to apples. And I know we wanted to also get folks hear your whys, and I know we haven't heard from a few folks yet. I know, Mark, you look like you had something to share.
Well, I was just going to ask, I had in the professional, I've been exposed to the Harvard fundraising juggernaut and how they set up their asks and the amount of research that they do about the people. It just struck me that given the range of issues we work on, is it possible to find out before a significant ask what that person's particular interests are? Because it may be that someone has a major involvement in immigration or a major involvement in racial equity, something that we could then focus some of the stories, some of the particular grantees that we're working on, so that the story resonates with that person in their special area of interest. Obviously, we don't have the structure that an organization like Harvard or the Brigham or any of the others, we don't have that. But is there a way of getting some of that background information of the people from whom we're going to make major asks?
I don't know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Allison.
No, go ahead, Ellie.
Oh, I was going to say, you know, most of the offices, the teams I've worked in Harvard and Dana-Farber, et cetera, they do have, you know, 20-piece team of researchers. But Google is your friend, and you can find out a lot of information that way. And, you know, if there must, I don't know what software you have, but there are some database systems you can subscribe to in the office that, you know, provides some pretty good research material if you're a subscriber, or if you use Blackbaud, they have Wealth Engine, things like that. So you can get some of that information. You know, there's so much available online that, you know, unprotected. So, you know, you can often get as much as you really need to have a meaningful solicitation. And, you know, at this stage, unless fundraising has really dramatically changed for the organization, it's rare that you're going to somebody and asking, you know, for hundreds of thousands of dollars, where you really have to have a nuanced understanding of their philanthropy. I think, you know, if they're making $10, $25, $50,000 gifts around the city, and you have a sense of where, you probably have enough information to have a meaningful conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just also add that, as you said, Google can give you amazing amounts of information, and even if you just have a nugget, oftentimes that meeting, that in-person meeting or Zoom meeting, is an opportunity to just sort of, you know, dive deeper and say, well, I know you support the ballet. What else is important to you? And sort of have that person tell you, and, you know, try to draw that out for them while you're meeting with them. And then you can follow up and say, oh, I remember we talked about this, and the Lenny Zakem does that, and, you know, do that matching up after your meeting as well.
That I couldn't agree with you more. Great point, Lauren. And I think, you know, like, even if you did have somebody who you know has given to the ballet, be able to say, you know, the Lenny Zakem Fund has supported Ballet Rocks. You might not even know that, you know, like, connect it. And also, you remind me, you know, when you go on Google, that you can find so much, that also having that one nugget that might not have anything to do with the Lenny Zakem Fund, but, you know, they sit on the board of some organization, and, you know, the chair of that board, and you can just start the conversation with a place of familiarity that immediately makes, you know, we're in the same boat, we know the same people, you know, and you just have, or they graduated from the same university you did, or, you know, anything like that is enough to get the spark of conversation going. I'd love to hear from whomever hasn't had any airtime yet.
I have a question, but it might just be narrowly tailored to myself, so I don't want to waste people's time. But I've always struggled with how to make an ask and distance it from myself. Like you say, you don't have a problem asking for money for LZF, but for me, sometimes I feel like, because he's my dad, it is just, I'm asking people to give me money. And so I'm uncomfortable with that. And I've always struggled on how to get past that. I don't know if you have any.
Well, I am so glad you asked that question, because honestly, I think it's fairly easy, in the sense that, you know, yes, I share a last name, and yes, that was my dad. But just as my dad didn't start this organization to contribute to his pet passions, I'm not doing this to contribute. It's not about any one man or any one person or any one daughter. It's really about the mission of the work, and it's about social justice, and it's about, you know, enabling the community, and your things such as, I loved this, the 7 principles: social justice, grassroots leadership, diversity and belonging, learning, bridge building, responsiveness, and love. And nowhere in there does it say anything about Lenny Zakem or Dina Zakem or anything else. So I would use that. I would say, you know, how proud you are to have that name, but it's not about the name, it's about the principles and the values and the impact. Does that
And
help?
it's so in line also with who you are and the work that you do, Dina. That it's, you know, we all are our parents' children, you know what I mean? So we all have history different than you, obviously, but
yeah,
you know,
I just
you've
always
grown.
feel like someone's going to feel guilty if they don't say yes to me or something, or they'll feel compelled, or I don't know, maybe not.
You know, it's funny you say this, Dina, because, you know, for other people, it's hard because they're asking for funds for someone's name and they might think, oh, it's a family foundation and this is how they grant money. So we all have to explain it one way or the other. But I think because it's always rooted in the values and the principles, it's just like, it's almost like an invitation for you to educate and share, as Susie said, your passion, that part of which was given to you by your parents.
Mhm.
And when you're talking to somebody, you can say, like your parents likely gave you your values. You know, it's, I'm glad you asked that question.
Thanks.
This is Michael, and I think I want to echo part of that, and because I was absolutely the world's worst stockbroker once, and Rob, by the way, if your financial advisor doesn't contribute, you need a new financial advisor, we can move into the chat room and discuss your needs. But in any event, once it became sort of when I started my business, and Dina, it's the same thing. You didn't necessarily start with the Zachem Fund, but your heart is in there. And Ellie, I really like what you said earlier about that. There's only a handful of things you need to know, but a heart full of things you need to feel and express that. And I think that when I started my business, that sort of came out in spades in ways it was impossible to do so when I was working for the Kidder Peabodys of the world and stuff like that. And people respond to that passion. And I sit there and I listen to, and I know we're not trying to condense this all into an elevator speech because people talk about that in my industry too. And I think it's all, you know, you have to know certain things, but it's all kind of bullshit. You know, people will do business. Like my clients, each one of them has a different and unique need. And I need to be able to speak to the things that are important to them. And people's engagement with philanthropy in general is driven by a lot of different factors. So understanding what that is and then how it can dovetail with what's being done at the Lenny Zachem Fund is terrific. And, you know, if people are just not in any way connected to that, and their interests are just elsewhere, they want to support, you know, the arts in some way, well, great. You know, I don't think you're ever going to be able to convince that person that they should support the Lenny Zachem Fund unless they have some interest in the community engagement model that the Lenny Zachem Fund provides. So I think it, you know, I don't know, it's almost like and I'm unfamiliar, if it's not coming to mind if I should be familiar with the one page that exists today of what it is, but those are sort of the table stakes, but what that means to each different person you're talking to is going to be different, you know, and it's just an understanding who your audience is and why they may even care. You know, there's going to be some people that and I think they're talking about our own personal networks more than, you know, the cold calling people. I'll leave that to Allison in the world to do that. But people will only sort of be interested if they have some general level of things they care about anyway. But Dina, I think the impassioned part about this being part of sort of the family and how much you feel about that is it's natural to kind of come out in the conversations in ways that you're not even asking people for money. You're just interested in having them understand it and how important this part is to you. And, you know, those people that are so inclined and have this in their world are going to contribute probably more than you'd even ask them to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think your father, Dina, has left such a beautiful gift and legacy for to be shared. And it is grounded in that passion, desire to see people be able to enjoy racial, social, and economic justice. And you can speak to it in your own way from your own experiences. And I certainly can, and from my own experiences, everybody on this call. And I think when you speak to your friends, and certainly when I speak to donors or my friends, I recognize that perhaps I'm further along in my philanthropic kind of understanding of what motivates or inspires my giving, and to be in a place to be able to talk about it and to be okay with how I direct my giving, and some people are not quite further along in that journey. And so I think to invite them to learn about the Lenny Zakem Fund is an opportunity for them to perhaps start that journey and to see what resonates with them, and how they want to be a part of the larger community in terms of helping their fellow man.
Mhm.
I apologize to the group. I don't mean to be disruptive. I have to jump a little bit early, but I just want to reiterate the best fundraising advice I got was that people who are looking for a yes will look for a yes, and people who are looking for a no will look for a no. And it's just about the time you spend with them to figure that out. So I just want to kind of double down on Michael's point. And as I've said, I asked for people for millions of dollars for many years, all day, every day. And I'm not super comfortable, but always doing it. But that's why I've said that I just go in knowing how I'm going to start, and then knowing how I'm going to close, and then sorting things out in the middle. And for me, we help people do X so that they can do Y, so that Z happens can be one formula to get there, but you don't have to be that formulaic for your start. And then your close is always, because you're a board member, and Allison and Eric will be in touch. So it's not that hard, I think, to be in our position to close it. But thanks everyone for the support of this session.
Thanks, Yasmin. Take
Thanks,
care.
Yasmin.
So just because I'm an invited guest, I'm going to jump in, probably inappropriately, but I'm the queen of that. I haven't heard Beth say anything. And I remember many years ago sitting across from you having wine at Brasserie Joe and recruiting you to be on the board. And I know you've been an amazing board member, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, not to put you on the spot or anything.
That's okay. Yeah, I have been quiet. I am definitely not, I guess, a fundraiser. And I don't mind asking for money, just so everybody knows, but I don't have the network to do it. And I always feel like, but I will tell you why I joined the Lenny Zakem Fund. And that was because I do believe in the mission of giving, and this is going to sound so much like an accountant, which I am, the operational money to small organizations that flows through so quickly. And I believe when I joined, and it still does, Lenny, this fund is great at giving that money. I think it's necessary. I think it's missing in a lot of the larger funders. And I think we've also become fabulous since I've been here, looking at how we have gotten our money, because we're now doing such a better job at consolidating larger funders, and they trust us to give us their money so that we can deploy it to these grassroots organizations. So I guess, when I was doing my homework, that's kind of what I came up with. I'm happy to go and talk to people to give money. I think it's great, the things we're talking about. And I think that getting these one-page things out to the board so they can talk to anybody they talk to in the same, it's funny, somebody says I don't like elevator pitches. Well, my background was to marketing companies. I think you need the elevator pitches, because then they all have to be tailored to the way you talk, but they all should be coming from the same messaging. So,
And I
Ellie.
will say that we have a former board member who actually was in an elevator with one of our with a stranger, and he asked something about the work that she did, and in an elevator ride, she was able to say enough that this person has been giving $10,000 a year for many years now. He wants nothing else to do with the fund. He learned a lot that moment, and it was an elevator pitch.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I think I've heard my voice way too much. So I'm just going to say a heartfelt thank you for keeping the work going and for making the Lenny Zakem Fund just better and better and better. Lots and lots of good luck. If I can ever be helpful, there's nothing you can't ask. So thank you. Really, thank you. Keep it up.
And can I ask Dominique and Lauren just to introduce themselves a little more for Ellie?
Sure, should I go first? Hi, Ellie. I'm Lauren Van Allen, and I'm a new board member at the Lenny Zakem Fund. I just joined this past November. I'm a lifelong Bostonian. My parents and 3 of my 4 grandparents are from Boston, and 2 of my great-grandparents are from Boston. So love this city very much, and I'm very happy to be a part of the Zakem Fund. And if I can just quickly, I did prepare my why. So I'll share them with you. In addition to just being deeply in love with the city of Boston and being a person of color, many of you may know that Boston's reputation among Black people in particular is not a good one. It's very, very unflattering, in fact. And our legacy of busing and other things really sort of sticks to us. So it's very meaningful for me as a Black American to be a part of an organization that, and have proximity, meaningful proximity to the fund that's really working to make our city more inclusive. And that the work, you know, the mission and the work of the fund it just resonates with me deeply. And I would also just say the focus on grassroots organizations. I can share with you, those of you who don't already know, I work at the Boston Foundation and we're a funder, but many grassroots organizations are overlooked by larger funders. So it also resonates with me very much that this fund is really focused on grassroots organizations, many of them led by people of color, and not just by making grants, but it's the wraparound, all the other sort of supports that I think are really, really important to these organizations. And so that's my why.
I'm just going to say thank you for sharing, and lucky you to be new and just starting.
So hi, Ellie, I'm Dominique Ramos. I'm the program and office administrator over at the fund. I've started in I think September 2019, so just as Jude was on her way out. So my why is that I've always had a focus on community-led and community-defined issues, and so I was always critical of philanthropy. You know, I never liked how philanthropy tended to fund people who would go into communities they have no connection to, define a problem for them, and then try and solve it, which would be tone deaf sometimes. But what I liked about the fund is actually my mentor was Celeste Lee, who was a former board member, and she was telling me how LZF isn't that kind of philanthropist. They let the community define the problem, they let the community lead the solution, and then they also support the community not through just a grant, but also through education and through pro bono legal services. And so that was really attractive to me, and that was my why.
Thank you for sharing, and also a warm welcome to you. No wonder everything's going so well, guys. You get all the right people here.
It's a pretty wonderful group.
All right. So any other sharing? Anyone else want to share? I'll take that as a no.
Well, I might add one last thing. I always feel like I talk too much, but you know, depending on who I'm talking to and what if I know what they care about. I've also been talking about the challenge that Black-led organizations have had historically in raising funds, and how we just can't allow that to continue. And, I speak for myself as a board member, as a chair of the board. I feel so committed to changing that dynamic and seeing that not happen at the Lenny Zakem Fund, so that we can also share the lessons that we learn with the community organizations with whom we partner. And that just feels really important to me, especially right in line with what you were saying, Lauren, in changing that dynamic that we're so used to in Boston, and just not letting it live on.
Thank you so much for that, Susie.
You're welcome.
And I think we can, thank you so much, Ellie, just for joining us for today. And want to pass it back to both Susie and Tim for kind of like a wrap up or final thoughts.
Tim, I'm leaving it to you because I've spoken enough.
No problem. I always love hearing you speak. And I would say this to the full group, which is that I appreciate you all so much for taking the time to participate in this. Of course, Ellie did a phenomenal job, which was certainly expected, but nonetheless, it's always great to see Ellie back in the mix and doing so much to help us with this discussion. I thought it was very, very fruitful. I want to thank all of you who've attended. This is such an important, time for us as an organization, as the LZF, and especially given what a lot of these grassroots organizations are going through right now with COVID and the impacts thereof. So to the extent we have the opportunity to, extend ourselves a bit in terms of reaching out to whether it's people in our network or trying to learn more about different ways to get the word out there about the good work that we're doing, it's definitely a huge plus. And so I know that given the work, I've been doing with the broader development committee and certainly with Allison and others, we appreciate so much the support of our board members. And if at any point in time you have any questions, need any support, you think that you've identified, somebody who could be a respective donor or anything of that nature, most certainly, feel free to reach out and let us know. We're happy to offer a helping hand in terms of helping you navigate the process of engaging in some of those kind of conversations. But definitely keep your eye out for those opportunities. And thanks again just for participating in this session, because I think that doing this, is the kind of thing that, helps us to all become more comfortable and be successful, as an organization and individually with this process. So anything else you want to add there, Susie?
I want to thank you, Tim, and I want to thank Ellie for doing this today, and deeply thank you for introducing me to the Lenny Zakem Fund, because it changed my life and my heart.
Likewise, thank you, Ellie. And I realized I had one follow-up question for you, Ellie. So Lauren said something about meaningful proximity, which I'm using. But Ellie, you said something about handful and heartful. There are only a handful of things you have to know. And then you said a heartful of things, something, something, something earlier.
I think you have to feel, maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's
Heartfelt things you need to feel. I wrote it down as well.
Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
I was trying
And
to.
in case anybody thought I've used that before, that was newly minted. You can all have it. I grant it to you to use if it's helpful. I've never said it before.
Nice.
And I will also say, Eric, as soon as you started to talk, I went into my own little panic, because throughout my career, I have said lots of things, and unfortunately, I rarely remember them.
Well, that was a good one.
And
It stuck out.
I can't tell you how many times I'll meet somebody, like I'll give a talk or I'll meet them in an elevator or whatever, and they'll say, "Oh, I never will forget when you said blah, 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 and I'll be thinking, I said that?
Yeah, it was
Whoa,
good.
or, oh my God, did I really say that?
Well, thank
So,
you. It was really good.
That was
you can
great.
have it.
It was great, Ellie. Thank you.
Pleasure, really is.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have
Good
a
luck
great.
with all of your fundraising.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Allison.
Thanks.
Thank you, Allison and Eric.